Alright, hello Year 10. So, today we're going to carry on with our work on hormones and homeostasis. Now, last lesson we learned about thermoregulation. Excuse me. The only kind of homeostasis we're going to learn about, which does not have any hormones involved. From now on, the whole part of the topic is going to be hormones and how each hormone carries out its role of homeostasis. On the board are 5 questions, starter questions. Now, as usual, I want you to treat this exactly like you would a normal lesson. So get your book, your pen, there's 5 questions, and you can complete those at the back of your book. So you can pause me. I anticipate you taking about 3 or 4 minutes on this. Right, hopefully you paused me though. If you didn't, do it now. What is thermoregulation is the first question. What you should have written down is that thermoregulation is how your body maintains the correct body temperature. The part of the brain that is used to control thermoregulation is the thermoregulatory center in the hypothalamus. Vasoconstriction is where blood vessels near the surface of your skin constrict, squeeze, or close to prevent blood getting near the skin so that you lose less heat. Shivering increases temperature because it causes the muscles to perform aerobic respiration, which is an exothermic reaction, gives out heat. Sweating decreases temperature because when you evaporate sweat, it absorbs some heat from its environment, which causes your heat temperature to drop. Fine. Now, we're going to move on to something slightly different today. We're going to do a general overview of the hormone-producing system, the endocrine system. So, the learning objectives for the day are, firstly, to explain what hormones are. Well, hopefully you've got some idea of what they are. We're going to talk about them a lot. How they spread chemical messages around the body. We're going to describe where each of the key glands are in the body and explain why the pituitary is called the master gland. Now, it's not difficult, this one. I had in mind we were doing sugar homeostasis. In actual fact, that's next lesson. This is quite a nice, straightforward one. So let's start off. Now, we're going to start off with a video. I'm going to play the video to you. The YouTube link will also be directly underneath the video in case you can't hear it very well from out of my speakers into the video. So before we start, I want you to pause this video and I want you to write down these 4 questions, leaving a line between each one. So pause me now and write down these questions, make sure you have them written out in full. So the video is here. Now, the link is there. It will also be in the description of this YouTube video if you can't hear this. So,
the basic units of this system are special kinds of glands. Unlike other glands, endocrine glands secrete their products, called hormones, directly into the bloodstream. The powerful hormones travel everywhere in the body, influencing every aspect of life in very specific ways. Many parts of the body secrete hormones, but 6 major types of glands are of particular importance to adults. They are the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas, the thyroid and parathyroids, the adrenals, the gonads, and in the head, the pituitary. Every major endocrine gland is a highly structured organ. Throughout each run the smallest blood vessels, capillaries. Hormones are secreted into the capillaries. Through a microscope, it is possible to see red blood cells as they move through the capillaries and veins. Hormones, however, are not actually visible. They are in solution in the blood plasma, just as salt is in solution in seawater and is invisible. The hormones enter the general circulation. Eventually, they filter back to the capillaries elsewhere in the body. Unlike the red blood cells, hormones travel freely through the capillary walls. Though they travel everywhere in the body, hormones only influence specific target cells. A hormone may have relatively few targets, affecting only a few kinds of cells. A different hormone may affect nearly every cell in the body. Every target cell has a chemical receptor, which the hormone specifically fits as a key specifically fits a lock. The receptor may be on the surface of the cell or inside it. A cell that is not a target for a particular hormone has no receptors for it and is not affected by it.
So, those 4 questions then, if you didn't complete them, pause it now and complete them. I'm going to talk through the answers. So, what does an endocrine gland do? An endocrine gland releases hormones into the blood. What kinds of blood vessels run through the glands? Capillaries. How do hormones move around the body? Through the bloodstream, through the blood, in solution, dissolved in your blood. And how do hormones know which cells are their targets? Well, of course, they don't know anything, they're only chemicals, but they attach to their targets because their targets have receptors on the outside. Now let's go into a bit more detail on that. Here is a very simple diagram of the endocrine system. Now I'd like you to have a look at that. I'd like you to draw it out very simply. It doesn't need to be fancy. I don't need it all shaded in or coloured. There should be 3 cells, a nice wavy red thing with some purple dots moving through it, and I'd like you to try to label it with those words that are on your screen now. So have a couple of minutes for that, maybe 3 or 4 if you're a slow drawer. Again, please don't make it an artwork, and pause me, do this task, and I'm going to give you the answers when you unpause me. So, hopefully you've drawn it out nicely. What you have here then is the yellow cell is an endocrine cell. Endocrine just means hormone producing. So an endocrine gland is a hormone producing gland, and that is made of endocrine cells, which are hormone producing cells. Then you've got this purple dot. This purple dot is the hormone itself, and it's moving through blood vessels, which is the pink kind of wavy thing. That's a capillary. And there's 2 types of cell in the body for every hormone. There are cells that it will affect and cells that it won't affect. The blue cell is being affected. It is a target cell, because you can see the purple hormone dot thing has joined up to that receptor and is going to cause that blue cell to do something. And what it will cause it to do will depend on the hormone. That green cell doesn't have the right receptors. Its receptors have little triangle shapes in them, not round shapes like the blue receptors. So, that green cell is not a target because the hormone can't activate it. It's a non-target cell. And how does the system know what cells to affect? By attaching the receptors to the correct cells. So every cell has receptors for the hormone that it is supposed to interact with. Some hormones affect pretty much every cell, like she said. An example of something that affects a lot of cells in your body would be testosterone. Testosterone is a hormone which we're going to talk about later, but it causes you to undergo changes involved in puberty, for instance facial hair growth, increased musculature, broader shoulders, genital growth, and so on and so forth. But all of the cells that are affected by testosterone have to have a testosterone-shaped receptor on the outside. So the cells in my face do, the cells in all over my body do for body hair, my shoulders, the cells in my muscles, the cells in my genitals, they all have testosterone-shaped receptors. Other hormones don't have that many cells that they affect. An example would be something like adrenaline. Adrenaline does affect a lot of places, affects the muscles and the heart, the lungs to a certain extent, but it doesn't, for instance, affect your feet, because adrenaline is there to increase your heart rate and to cause you to be able to move faster and exercise more. We'll talk about that in another lesson. So, the next bit is to be able to understand the differences between the endocrine system and the nervous system. And again, I'd like you to write down these 7 points, and next to each one, either write endocrine or nervous. pause me, please, and do that. So, acts very quickly. Well, the endocrine system, I'm sure you can imagine, takes quite a long time to work. Because if you have to create these chemicals, pump them into the blood, and then pump them around the body to the correct part of the body, that can take a while. Now, I'm only talking large numbers of seconds or minutes. But if you want a fast response, like I've seen a bear, I have to run away, you don't want that to be caused by hormones, because you will still be stood there 20 seconds later when the bear eats you. Acts very quickly is not an endocrine system thing. Acts very quickly is a nervous system thing. So you should have written nervous system. The nervous system can act in tenths of a second. Long-lasting response. Let's think about this again. If I want a long-lasting response, I want a hormone. I can keep creating these chemicals for all eternity, and these chemicals can hang around for a long time. With nervous responses, you send the electrical impulse up your nerves to your brain, and then it's done, it's gone. You can't maintain long-term changes that way. That's why, for instance, increased musculature in men, which happens during puberty, is controlled by a hormone and not by a nerve. Otherwise, you'd get increased musculature and then it would immediately go away again. But because you can keep creating testosterone for a long time, we can maintain that for your life. Chemical messenger carried in the blood is a nice easy one, that's the endocrine system. Electrical impulse carries a message, similarly easy, nervous system. Chemical messenger diffuses across a synapse is an interesting one. We don't need to know much about synapses beyond that fact, and that is a nervous system trait. Chemicals made and released by glands is an endocrine system change, and coordinate a response by the body. Well, both is the answer. Both are coordinating a response by the body. They actually have very similar roles. It's just the nervous system is for quick, short-lasting, and the endocrine system is for slow, long-lasting. But both of them are aiming to make a change in your body. The nervous system, it might be just changing the way your arm is, moving it around. The endocrine system might be changing the way your body looks or acts, or the chemicals that it makes. The point I want to come to, it's very easy to think of this like an enzyme and a substrate, and it is a little bit similar, in that the hormone fits into the receptor like a lock and a key. But it's not the same thing. These receptors are not enzymes, and it's quite important to know that they are different. Enzymes are designed to make chemical reactions faster. These receptors are just used to tell the cell what to do. It's an information service. Right, there's your answers which I already gave you. Right, fine. We're going to have to do this slightly differently to the way we do it in class. I'm going to show you a diagram on the board. Now, usually that would be a bit of a speed game. Obviously on a YouTube video that doesn't work because you can just pause it. But this is a diagram we have to know pretty much off by heart. I'm not so worried about what each gland does at this point as I am in knowing where each gland is. We will go into what each gland does. Each one has its own lesson. So we're going to have a whole lesson on the thyroid, a whole lesson on the pancreas, a whole lesson on the adrenal gland, for instance. But I would like you to know where each bit is. So, you've got the brain is obviously the brain. It's not actually a gland at all. It's just used to show you where the pituitary gland is. The pituitary gland sits just underneath the brain. It hangs down on its own little stalk. Now, it's literally pea-shaped, pea-sized, and it dangles down below the brain. Okay, then you've got the thyroid gland, which is in your neck, right where your Adam's apple would be on either side of it. You've got your pancreas. We should already know that from the digestive system. The pancreas is used to create both digestive enzymes, which we learned about in year 9, or did we? We may have been away for that. we will, and it also produces the hormones insulin and glucagon. And that's right, pretty much dead central of your body. It's attached onto your digestive system by a little tube, a little duct. Then you've got your kidneys on each side. The kidneys, again, are actually not glands. The only reason they're there is to show you that the adrenal glands are sat directly on top of the kidneys like little hats. You've got your kidneys there with your adrenal gland directly on top. And then you've got what we call the gonads. We can call it ovaries or testes, depending on whether you're male or female. The testes, I hope everyone knows where they are, and the ovaries, I'm always surprised by how few people do know where they are, but you can see on the diagram roughly where they're found. Now what I'd like you to do, try not to flick back if you can. There's a diagram there. I'd like you to draw yourself a little stick man. I'm not expecting, again, a piece of art. Usually I would print you one of these out, but obviously quite difficult for me to get you diagrams at the moment. I'd like you to draw yourself a little stick man. I'd like you to draw in the little organs and glands, and I'd like you to fill this in. So please pause me and carry that out. Right, here are your answers. There you go. There are your answers. Now, I'm going to play a bit of a game now. A game. It's only a game if you're in school, I suspect, but I'd like you to turn to the back of your books, and I'm going to flick quite fast through this. Usually I'd get you to call out what each one is. I'd like you for each one just to very quickly jot down what each bit is. In a diagram, you have to jot down what the bit in, I believe, red is. So, can you write down what that bit is? And then, what that bit is? And then, what that bit is? What that bit is? What that bit is? What that bit is again? What that bit is? And so on. And so forth. Keep going. If you need to pause me to keep these down, that's fine. And that bit. And lastly, that bit. You should be able to do these very fast, and it's taking you a long time. We've got to make sure we're memorising this diagram. I'm not going to go over this huge amount, it's extremely important. So from the top, what you should have written down is, you've got the brain there, pituitary, the ovary, the adrenal, the thyroid, the brain again, pituitary again, the ovaries, pancreas, and the thyroid, I believe was the last one we did. Now, at this point, we don't care what every gland releases. But there is one gland we need to know a lot about before we start, and that is a gland that has the task of regulating every other gland. It's called the pituitary gland. And hopefully everyone can remember from what we just talked about where it is found. It is found directly underneath the brain, in a prime position to be controlled from the blood and also from the nervous system, because a lot of blood goes to your brain, and also, well, obviously, the central nervous system is centered around your brain. You need to write these two bullet points down. The pituitary gland is often called the master gland, if you want to call it that, because it releases hormones that control the output of pretty much every other gland. It is one gland to rule them all. Right? This is the gland that is sat there telling every other gland what to do. And it, in turn, is receiving information from the brain and taking in information from the blood to decide what to do. So, this is pretty much the most important gland. If you have a pituitary that fails, that causes you enormous issues, because it then affects every other gland in your body. Now, We're going to go through some questions now, and to be honest, this is all the information we need for today. If you're feeling a bit lost, the things I need you to know are: what's a gland? How do glands work, i.e. where are they releasing their hormones into? How do the hormones get around the body? How do the hormones know what cells to attach to? I need you to know where the different glands are, but not what they do. And I need you to know that the pituitary gland controls the output of the other glands. If you know how the hormones work, how the glands work, where the glands are, and that the pituitary gland controls the output of the other glands, you're on top of the work so far. We're going to do some questions to make sure everyone's on top of that. So, here are 6 questions. Now, I am quite happy for you just to pause it, look at it, decide what your answers are, and then unpause me. I don't need you to write down this because you have a lot of notes on this already. If you haven't already, pause me, because here are the answers. A gland, specifically an endocrine gland, is an organ which releases hormones into the blood. The endocrine system is the collection of glands and hormones which transmit messages around your body. The nervous system acts faster. A hormone is a chemical which is released by a gland into the blood and travels and sends messages. You can think of it as a chemical messenger, if you like, is a good way of putting it. The endocrine system acts for longer, and the adrenal gland is located on top of the kidneys. Here's a real exam question. Nice and easy, I would say. Have a glance at that. Decide what A and B are. Now, I would argue that A is not really pointing to the right bit, but the only one that makes sense, well, the adrenals don't, because the adrenals we know are on top of the kidneys. The pancreas doesn't make sense, because it's definitely not in your head. The testis, I think we all know the testicles are not in your head, and the thyroid is the one in your throat. So the only one that's anywhere near that is the pituitary. A is the pituitary. B, it's sat on top of the kidneys. That is the adrenal gland. Another question, last one I believe. Which gland produces estrogen? You know what, no, forget that question, gents. We'll do that one another time. So, that is the end of the lesson. So to make sure to recap, we should know by now what hormones are and how they spread chemical messages around the body, where the key glands are in the body, and why the pituitary gland is called the master gland. If you've got that, you've got this lesson, and well done. Right, have a very good day, gents. It is a shame that I will not be seeing any of you anytime soon, but I look forward to seeing you all hopefully after the February half term.